Hello and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today it is time to do another video based on the event that is currently going on at the moment, which is gripping the entirety of the continent of Europe, and that is of course the European Championships, or colloquially known as the Euros. Every tournament since the very first one, all the way back in 1960, much like with any international tournament in existence, has had its fair share of shocks and bizarre moments, so I thought that I would go through each and every one of them and pick out what I believe to be the most noteworthy moments from each of them. I've considered events that not only took place during the finals, but also during qualifying for a particular tournament as well. So it's not just a case of a thing that happened during the tournament itself, it could also be leading up to the tournament, or in the qualification process for a particular edition of the Euros. I hope that clears everything up, and without any further ado, here is what I believe to be the most noteworthy event at each of the 15 completed European Championships thus far. 1960. Spain refused to play the Soviets. For the very first tournament in 1960, the qualification process was a straight knockout tournament involving a preliminary round between Czechoslovakia and the Republic of Ireland, a round of 16, and the quarterfinals, with only 4 teams emerging out of this to earn the right to play in the finals in France, who themselves had to qualify but were only announced as hosts of the tournament once they had made it. Alongside them would be Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and the USSR, whose route to what was essentially the semi-finals was gifted to them by General Franco. A man who harboured a deep dislike for anything Soviet owing to their completely contrasting ideological beliefs and their involvement in the Spanish Civil War against him, Franco refused to let his nation travel to the USSR or for them to come to Spain for their quarter-final clash, and as the Soviets refused the offer to play a one-legged game at a neutral venue, Spain were disqualified. The USSR took full advantage of this, as they overcame Czechoslovakia in the semi-finals and then Yugoslavia in the final after extra time to win the first ever European Championships, and the only major trophy in the nation's history, both pre and post-split. 1964. Spain decide to play the Soviets. As fate would have it, Spain and the USSR both made it to the final of the second European Championships, which was held in Spain. Perhaps realising the magnitude of the game and how much a victory would mean to the Spanish populace, Franco actually decided to allow the two to face off, and he attended the match himself alongside 79,000 others at the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium. His gamble paid off, as an 84th minute Marcelino goal secured a 2-1 win for the Spaniards, but the general's influence on the game didn't stop there, as he doctored footage to make it seem as though the winning goal was set up by Real Madrid's Amancio instead of the Basque-born Barcelona player Chus Pereira, who had scored Spain's first, something which even Franco himself couldn't alter. A passing mention must also go to the events in the Greece-Albania game that never took place, as the Greeks pulled out of their qualifier owing to being at war with Albania at that time. 1968. Italy's lucky toss. If you ever think that a certain team is unlucky to be knocked out despite playing well in a particular game, spare a thought for the USSR in 1968, who make their third consecutive appearance in this video. In their semi-final against Italy, they put in a stubborn display to draw 0-0, but as they couldn't be separated after extra time, the game had to be completed owing to the scheduling of the tournament, and a penalty shootout hadn't been formalised just yet. The two captains went to the dressing room and had a coin toss. Italy captain Gianluca Vercetti called correctly, racing upstairs to let the players know what had happened almost straight away, and it soon filtered through to the spectators too that Italy were in the final purely by luck, a final which they were going to win after a replay against Yugoslavia. Also during this tournament, Alan Mullery became the first ever England player to be sent off in a match for the Three Lions, after he kicked Dobrivoje Tribic in the testicles in the 89th minute of their semi-final defeat at the hands of Yugoslavia. 1972. The Netherlands failed to qualify. To be honest, the 1972 edition was probably the most eventless tournament out of all of them, as far as my research could tell me at the very least. Although England losing to West Germany 3-1 in a game which spelled the end of the class of '66 and so the beginning of the end for Alf Ramsey as England boss was too noteworthy not to give a mention to. However, my choice is the failure of the Netherlands during qualifying, as despite boasting a squad containing the likes of Ruud Krol, Johan Neeskens, Johan Cruyff and Pierre Keizer, all of whom were key figures for Ajax during their hat-trick of European Cup wins between 1971 and 1973, the Netherlands couldn't even make it out of their qualifying group. Their loss to Yugoslavia in their third match would prove pivotal, as despite 2 wins in their final 2 games, they were both eventually made immaterial by Yugoslavia securing the point they needed in their 5th game against East Germany to book their place in the quarter-finals, leaving the Netherlands to lick their wounds and come back stronger for the 1974 World Cup. 1976. The origin of the Panenka penalty. Everyone clued up on football jargon knows what a Panenka penalty is, where you casually dink it down the middle of the goal in the hopes of fooling the keeper, and you run the risk of it coming off and looking like a boss, or failing and looking like an idiot. It is, perhaps unsurprisingly, named after Antonin Panenka, who, after seeing Uli Hoeneß blast his penalty over the bar in the shootout of the final between Czechoslovakia and West Germany, stepped up to take the penalty which could win Czechoslovakia the Euros. As Sepp Maier dived to his left, Panenka demonstrated immense composure and audacity to casually chip the ball straight down the middle of the net, and Czechoslovakia won what would prove to be their only major trophy in their history. Remarkably, this is the only shootout that the Germans have ever lost at a major tournament, as they've won all the other 6 that they have taken part in since then, beating England twice and Argentina, Italy, France and Mexico once each via this method, although never in a final. 1980. The end of the third place match. You may have noticed that at every single major international tournament, there is the meaningless third place playoff to determine which nation is the lucky recipient of the ultimately pointless bronze medal. The Euros, therefore, is almost an outlier as it does not have a third place playoff anymore, and the final iteration of it came in 1980 between Czechoslovakia and Italy, the very year that the tournament was expanded from 4 to 8 teams. The game itself was a dull and drab affair that finished 1-1 and saw Czechoslovakia once again triumph on penalties, this time winning 9-8, but noticing the dwindling TV figures for the tournament more broadly and especially the third place match, UEFA decided to completely scrap it for future tournaments. From now on, anyone who would be knocked out of the semi-final stage simply goes home instead of having to play yet another match that only the 2 nations involved give a slight iota about. 1984. Magnifique Michel. Every now and then, there comes a tournament which has a particular player's name rubber stamped all over it, such as Diego Maradona at the 1986 World Cup or Pelé at the 1959 Copa America. The 1984 Euros undoubtedly belonged to Michel Platini, and despite the shock of West Germany not reaching the knockout stages, and both Italy and England failing to qualify altogether, I think this segment should be dedicated to the exploits of the French magician throughout the tournament. He scored in each of France's 5 games at the tournament, including bagging hat-tricks in consecutive games against Belgium and Yugoslavia, and bagging the 119th minute winner against Portugal in the semi-finals, and put in spellbinding displays throughout as the French claimed their first international trophy after a 2-0 final victory over Spain, in which, of course, Platini got the opener. His tally of 9 goals is the most that anyone has scored at one particular tournament, and it also makes him the highest goal scorer in the competition's history, tied with Cristiano Ronaldo, but CR7 has played at 4 European Championships to date, and it will be in 5 by the time this video goes out, whereas Platini only featured in 1 during his career, that 1984 triumph. If only he hadn't gone and tarnished his legacy so spectacularly. 1988, an unwanted firework display. France not even making it to the finals in 1988 and winning just once in their qualification group to finish in 3rd place behind East Germany and the USSR, and England losing all 3 of their group games at the finals despite proudly, and probably forcibly, singing that they would go all the way live on national TV, are honourable mentions, but I have to go with an incident during a qualifying game between the Netherlands and Cyprus. The Netherlands were winning 1-0 after a John Bosman toe poke when a firework, carefully wrapped inside a tennis ball, was thrown from the crowd onto the pitch and exploded right next to the Cypriot goalkeeper, Andreas Caritou. Despite this obvious turn of events, the players kept on playing for a good 15 seconds until the ball was eventually put out of play so that Caritou could receive treatment, and after he was stretchered off, the Cypriot players walked off the field in protest and refused to return. The referee went against the Cypriot team's wishes though and decided that the match must be concluded, and the Netherlands won 8-0 with Bosman netting 5, but UEFA awarded the win to Cyprus until it emerged that Caritou wasn't actually injured, and they decided to just annul the game completely and make it be replayed behind closed doors 2 months later. The Netherlands won again, but this time only by 4-0, and they went on to qualify for the tournament and win it thanks to a stunning Marco van Basten volley in the final, which could very easily have featured had it not been for that explosive display during qualifying. 1992. Yugoslavia's pain, Denmark's gain. This was a European Championships that saw Graham Taylor labelled as a turnip by the Scum newspaper after the Three Lions' elimination at the group stages, but I can't go with any other moment than Denmark's remarkable triumph. The only team presumably to have won a major tournament despite not actually qualifying for it in the first place, the Danes had finished second behind Yugoslavia in their qualification group, but after the Yugoslav Civil War broke out, they were banned from taking part in any sporting event, and Denmark were chosen to take their place 10 days before the European Championships began. Their coach, Richard Moller-Nielsen, had actually been preparing for such an eventuality, but their best player, Michael Laudrup, refused to travel, believing Denmark's chances of winning to be non-existent. However, Nielsen's defence-minded tactics worked a treat, as Denmark just about got out of their group before beating the Netherlands on penalties in the semi-finals and then stunning the Germans 2-0 in the final to earn Denmark a surprise title. I bet Laudrup was absolutely furious with himself. 1996. The dentist chair. There were quite a few notable events that happened when football was meant to come home, such as an expansion to 16 teams, Uri Geller flying above the England vs Scotland game and supposedly performing black magic to make Scotland miss a penalty, the first ever golden goal in international football, which came in the final no less, and England actually winning a penalty shootout. My choice though is the infamous dentist chair incident prior to the finals kicking off, as during a pre-season trip to Hong Kong, the England players were photographed on a night out, essentially taking part in being pulled back on a chair and having double or triple shots of tequila poured down their throats. This caused outrage in the press, who labelled them, and especially Paul Gascoigne, as drunken oafs, but in their game against Scotland, merely 90 seconds after Geller supposedly worked his magic, Gascoigne performed some of his own by flicking the ball over Colin Hendry and smashing it into the back of the net for England's second goal, and ultimately decisive goal, of the game. Gascoigne then lay down by the side of the pitch in a pose similar to the dentist chair and had water sprayed down his throat. A tongue-in-cheek riposte to the tabloids is always a good mark in my book. 2000. The curious case of the Netherlands and their penalties. As we all know, England are normally hopeless at penalties, but the Dutch managed to put in a display from 12 yards in their semi-final clash against Italy at Euro 2000 that somehow eclipses all of the Three Lions' achievements, or lack thereof. They were awarded 2 penalties during the first 90 minutes, but Frank de Boer saw his kick saved by Francesco Toledo and Patrick Kluivert smacked his one against the post. Despite battering the 10-man Italian team for most of the game, they couldn't make the most of their opportunities and it went to penalties, where the Dutch proceeded to miss 3 more, including one from Jaap Stam that went so high that it probably hit a space shuttle that may have happened to be floating by. France's incredible comeback in the final to beat Italy, and the holders Germany putting in a wretched display at the tournament, which saw them pick up just 1 point from 3 group games and lose 3-0 to a second-string Portugal, can't go without mention here, but missing 5 penalties in 1 game is just too good, or too bad, not to be singled out, and as you would expect, the Dutch lost 3-1 in that penalty shootout. 2004. Just Greece. Greece's Euro 2004 triumph was as remarkable and preposterous as it was dull and dire, with coach Otto Rehhagel intentionally setting out for his team not to lose or concede a goal, and if that meant putting 17 men behind the ball, then so be it. The Greeks were 150-1 outsiders to win the tournament, which was only the second one that they had participated in their entire history, but they reached the knockout stages by virtue of goals scored ahead of Spain no less, before winning all of their knockout games 1-0, including the final against Portugal, whom they'd beaten 2-1 in their opening game, to lift the trophy. Their semi-final was particularly noteworthy though, as it saw the only silver goal in international football history, whereby if you were winning at half-time and extra time, you would go through, and Trajanos Delas's 105th minute goal against the Czech Republic proved to be a silver goal. The method was dropped immediately after the tournament concluded, so we've never seen it again. 2008. Poland's war on Howard Webb. I've covered England's qualifying exploits for this tournament more than enough, so moving away from that, I decided to cover Poland's virtual war on Howard Webb instead, with an honourable mention going to French manager Raymond Domenech, who proposed to his girlfriend live on TV almost immediately after France's dismal tournament had reached its end in the group stages. And as far as I'm aware, she said no, which makes the moment 100 times worse. In Poland's second group game against Austria, one which they had to win to give themselves a decent chance of qualifying for the knockout stages, they were leading 1-0 in the 91st minute when Marcin Wasilewski pushed down Sebastian Prödl in the box and Howard Webb gave a penalty to the Austrians, which Ivica Vastic powered home, becoming the oldest player to score at the European Championships in the process. Poland's manager, Leo Beenhakker, said in the press conference afterwards that Webb was wanting to prove that he was quote-unquote a big boy, and a smear campaign was subsequently launched against him, with a tirade of hate emails being sent to Webb's email address, and even the Prime Minister of Poland went on record to say that he wanted to kill him. So much for an overreaction. 2012, the Netherlands' dismal failure. I can't ignore Lord Bettner scoring against Germany before displaying Paddy Power underwear in his celebration and being fined £75,000 in the process, but I think we should focus on the insane underperformance of the Netherlands, and I promise I'm not picking on them just for the sake of it. It was obvious the two big teams would be knocked out in Group B at the 2012 Euros, as the group of death saw Portugal, Germany, the Netherlands and Denmark, all in the top 10 of the FIFA World rankings, go head to head with each other. But the Netherlands made sure that one of those teams would almost immediately beat them after losing 1-0 in their first game to Denmark. They followed that up with two more awful performances against Portugal and then Germany, losing 3-2 and 2-1 to those respective teams, and crashed out in last place with the second worst record of any team at that summer's finals. Bear in mind, this is a team who had reached the final of the 2010 World Cup and would go on to finish third in Brazil in 2014, so to see them fail so spectacularly was as unexpected as it was shocking. 2016, that Cruyff turn. I'm aware that Iceland made it to the quarter-finals, not like I need reminding anyway, the Netherlands couldn't even qualify, and that it would be a 24-team competition for the first time, but I've decided to go with the moment when Robson-Kanu turned into the greatest striker on earth, even if it was for about 2 seconds. Wales were drawing 1-1 with hot favourites Belgium in the quarter-finals, but in the 55th minute, Robson-Kanu received a cross from Aaron Ramsey with his back to goal, and in one fell swoop, he took out 3 Belgium defenders with a delicious Cruyff turn before thumping the ball past Thibaut Courtois to make it 2-1 to Wales, and Sam Vokes was down another late on to make it 3-1 and send Wales through to the semi-finals. Given that Robson-Kanu was a free agent at this point, having just been released by Reading, it was a turn-up for the books, and although Atletico Madrid were reportedly interested, he ended up signing for West Brom instead, which I think you'll all agree is the next best thing. But that just about wraps up today's video, looking at the most notable moment from every single European Championship tournament in my opinion. If you did enjoy this video or found it to be relatively informative or entertaining, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button if you have not done so already. And you can ring the little notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a video straight away, and comment down below with what you think was the most notable moment from a specific tournament, or what the most notable moment from this tournament will be. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I will see you then.